In the charged silence of our family council, I caught my two-faced cousin's calculating smile, a single cutting glance that ignited both a bitter fury and a dangerous, undeniable attraction. As his eyes hinted at darker manipulations of our trust fund, I realized in that heart-stopping moment that the betrayal running through our bloodline had forever shattered the illusion of loyalty. Chapter 1. The Family Council Gambit. Amelia adjusted her navy blazer, glancing at her prepared slides. Tonight, she would expose the family trust's fraud, shattering years of complicity. The weight of responsibility filled her thoughts as she rehearsed her points on financial irregularities in her study. Each statistic echoed personal loss and betrayal, fueling her resolve for retribution. At 7 she entered the Grand Council chamber, where relatives mingled with old resentments. The oak table bore scars of past disputes, and today it would host a pivotal confrontation. Amelia settled into her chair, scanning familiar faces. Among them was Daniel, whose presence was both comforting and confounding, his gaze a mix of secrets and regrets. As Amelia began her presentation, her voice silenced dissent. She revealed manipulated accounts and hidden loopholes, each slide sending ripples through the room. Daniel interjected, his tone light but challenging, hinting at divided loyalties. Amelia countered smoothly, recalling his past betrayals while asserting her findings. The council room felt like a battleground, filled with partisan glances and the tension of looming change. Amelia's and Daniel's relationship, marked by clandestine meetings and tenderness, now faced public scrutiny. The lines between love and betrayal blurred with every statement. Amelia paused, recognizing her vendetta aimed at reforming a broken system. The trust fund's legacy demanded a reckoning. Daniel's layered involvement complicated her efforts, but offered hope for redemption. His expression softened, hinting at an internal battle, as debates over her evidence revealed deeper issues. As the meeting adjourned, some relatives clung to tradition, while others gathered around Amelia, hopeful for change. Daniel lingered unreadable as Amelia gathered her papers, feeling triumph and trepidation. The stage was set for future confrontations, with Daniel's lingering glance promising unresolved tension and challenging her to confront both the deceit and the man who might be her savior or undoing. Chapter 2. Secrets Behind the Spotlight. Amelia sat in the dim light of her study, a silent testament to the chaos that had slowly unraveled around her. The soft hum of her computer filled the space as she pored over reams of financial documents, her eyes meticulously scanning for the irregularities that hinted at something far more sinister than a mere accounting error. Within the layered spreadsheets and coded emails lay the trail of the manipulated trust fund, money diverted, numbers fudged, and transactions that defied reason. Every revelation was a brilliant but painful shard of truth, each discovery hardening her resolve to expose the fraud lurking behind the family's glittering legacy. The stakes were higher than ever before. In just a few days, Amelia was slated to deliver a business presentation that could turn the tide in her favor, with the potential to unmask the orchestrators of this financial deception. The pressure weighed on her like a tangible force, each tick of the clock underscoring the monumental consequences should she fail. The presentation was not merely an opportunity. It was a battlefield where her determination to secure justice would clash with powerful forces intent on keeping secrets buried. As the night deepened, casting long shadows across her cluttered desk, Amelia leaned back in her chair to examine the pieces of correspondence that had come through over the last week. A particular email from an anonymous source had piqued her interest, a cryptic message hinting at clandestine meetings and secret rendezvous, where the true nature of the financial irregularities might be lurking in the wings. With a shaky hand and a racing heart, she began mapping out the connections. Each note she jotted added urgency to her unfolding investigation. In the midst of this intellectual storm, a knock on the door startled her. The unexpected visitor was Daniel, his presence both a comfort and a complication. His expression, shadowed by concern and something unspoken, was laden with the weight of secrets. They had shared a history together, a turbulent mix of professional partnership and a simmering personal connection that rarely found the right moment to ignite. On this night, with her mind gripped by the labyrinthine puzzle of manipulated funds, his appearance brought both relief and an unsettling dilemma. Daniel's voice was gentle yet edged with something uncharacteristic as he said, "I heard you might need some help." His tone carried layers of concern, and Amelia couldn't help but notice the hesitant flicker in his eyes as he glanced at the scattered files on her desk. There was an electricity between them that night, a magnetism that compelled her to lean in closer despite the gravity of her task. She was acutely aware that in trusting him, she was stepping into dangerous territory, yet his presence felt indispensable at a moment when every resource was needed. For a long moment, the space between them felt suspended in time, crowded with the charged silence that often descends before a confession. Daniel's hand reached out tentatively, almost as if unsure whether to bridge the gap between duty and desire. In that pause, Amelia sensed the weight of vulnerability, her hardened exterior cracking under the possibility that the man before her might be more than just an ally in unveiling corruption. When his fingers brushed lightly against her cheek, the simple contact sparked a conflagration of emotions she had long kept at bay. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the room seemed to contract around them. The chaos of the investigation, the mounting pressure of the impending presentation, and the relentless pursuit of truth melted into the background. The vulnerability in Daniel's eyes resonated with the deep, stirring loneliness in Amelia's heart, a loneliness that had been both a driving force and a source of pain. The silence between them was profound, laden with the promise of forbidden intimacy and unspoken guilt. It was in that charged moment that the tension finally broke, and a hesitant, passionate kiss ensued. The kiss was a collision of desire and regret, a mingling of all the truths they both dared not voice. It was as if time itself recognized the gravity of the moment, each second dripping with the weight of secrets and the cost of betrayal. Yet, even as their lips moved together, a part of Amelia's mind screamed with caution. In the depths of Daniel's gaze, fleeting as it was, she saw hints of something darker, a shadow of involvement in the very fraud she was determined to expose. It was as if beneath the surface of his concern lay complicity, a demon's whisper that tainted the purity of their coming together. As they slowly pulled apart, both were left grappling with a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The intimacy of the kiss did nothing to erase the underlying tension. If anything, it further complicated their already precarious positions. Amelia's heart pounded not only with the passion she had momentarily embraced, but also with trepidation about what this shared vulnerability might mean in the grand scheme of her investigation. Daniel, for his part, looked away, his expression clouded with regret and a wariness that betrayed his calm facade. The following hours were a delicate dance between passion and purpose. With the aftershocks of their encounter still rippling through her, Amelia returned to the daunting task of finalizing her presentation. The documents lay open in front of her, their damning evidence of financial misappropriation, a stark reminder of the battle ahead. Every piece of hard evidence she gathered was a step closer to unmasking the fraud, yet each one also deepened the fissures in her trust for those around her. In the solitude of her study, she was resolute. She would not let her feelings, however turbulent, interfere with the mission that now defined her existence. Daniel's departure left an emptiness that mingled with the cold reality of her investigation. As she meticulously annotated financial reports and cross-referenced suspicious transactions, doubts began to plague her thoughts. Was his help genuine, or was it a calculated move designed to mislead her? The contradictions in his replies, the rapid withdrawals when questions of the trust fund arose, they all painted a portrait of a man caught between allegiances. Even as she felt the residual warmth of his passion, the evidence of his possible involvement haunted her. The truth, as it often does, lay hidden in the gray areas of loyalty and betrayal. Despite the internal storm, Amelia pressed on. Late into the night, with the city's lights flickering like distant beacons, she compiled the mounting evidence into a coherent narrative. Each incongruent figure, and every overlooked transaction, was a thread in the tapestry of deception. And as she pieced together the final details of her presentation, she couldn't help but wonder how many of these threads were entwined with Daniel's own tangled loyalties. By the time dawn crept over the horizon, Amelia's resolve had crystallized. The kiss with Daniel, a brief yet intensely transformative moment, had left her with more questions than answers. It was a raw reminder that beneath the polished surface of their public lives lurked dark, unspoken truths. As she prepared to face the high-stakes presentation, she also braced herself for what might come, the painful unveiling of secrets, the potential shattering of once trusted bonds, and a personal reckoning with a love that was as fraught with passion as it was with betrayal. In the interplay of light and shadows behind the spotlight, the truth awaited, an explosive revelation that promised to upend everything she thought she knew. Chapter 3: Exposure and Betrayal. The conference room buzzed with an anticipatory tension that belied the carefully laid out agenda. Today's business presentation was supposed to be a simple status update on the performance of the family trust fund, a cornerstone of the family's financial empire. Instead, as Amelia stepped onto the stage, she carried with her a dossier of evidence that would forever alter the course of their lives. Every eye in the room locked onto her, and with the steady calm of a seasoned professional, she began to expose the labyrinthine manipulations that had tainted the trust fund. A series of meticulously arranged slides illuminated behind her, each one meticulously detailing irregularities, forged documents, and unexplained fund transfers. As Amelia's voice resonated across the room, the veneer of respectability that had cloaked the family's affairs began to crack. The once revered institution was laid bare, and every member of the council felt the sting of betrayal dropping like lead into their hearts. The accusations were not vague murmurs, they were articulated with undeniable precision, inviting the entire room to cast aside all long-held deceptions. Among the stunned silence, the name that cut deepest for Amelia was that of Daniel, a man whose presence had always been synonymous with loyalty and intrigue in equal measure. As the evidence unfurled, it became inescapable that Daniel's hand had been present in every act of deception. His role in orchestrating the fraudulent maneuvers was laid out in excruciating detail. Email trails, financial records, and even whispered confessions caught on tape left little room for doubt. The shock was palpable, and whispers not only of corporate betrayal but of personal treachery began to ripple through the room. The moment tension broke into chaos came swiftly. After the presentation ended abruptly, the meeting dissolved into a heated impromptu council session in the grand foyer, a space that until now had been synonymous with unity and family pride. Voices rose and fury burned behind every accusation. Family members confronted one another with a passion that betrayed a deep and long-standing fracturing of trust. Amid the chorus of shattered allegiances, the room was soon dominated by the heated exchanges between Amelia and Daniel. In a recluse corner shielded by half-drawn curtains, their confrontation crackled with a volatile mix of anger, pain, and a mutual longing that defied the betrayal between them. Amelia's eyes, usually so composed, now shone with unshed tears and raw incredulity. "How could you, Daniel?" she demanded, her voice trembling between fury and sorrow. "We built our lives on trust, on the sturdiest foundations of promise, and you shattered that faith with your greed." Daniel's face was a portrait of conflict. Guilt danced with regret in his eyes, but so did desperation. The words on his lips were taut with anguish as he attempted to justify the unthinkable. "I did it for us, Amelia," he pleaded, his voice rough and uneven. "I thought it was the only way. I believed it would work out. I never intended to betray you, to betray this family." The charged silence that followed was punctured by a desperate push and pull of emotions. While the council and scattered family members watched from a distance, the two were locked in a battle between the past's cherished memories and the bitterness of current transgressions. Their exchange was punctuated by fleeting looks that held the ghost of their former intimacy. The passion that once had bloomed in quiet, tender moments was now trapped in a web of woven pain. As the confrontation escalated, there was an unspoken desperation that led them to a moment of physical closeness. Amid heated accusations and tearful admissions, a lingering kiss unfolded between them, a kiss that was as much a release as it was a curse. In that brief, suspended heartbeat of contact, the heat of their shared past collided with the bitterness of present betrayal. It was simultaneous agony and ecstasy, a reminder of everything that had been, and a portent of what might never be. Their lips met, tightly and fiercely, as if their embrace could reverse what had been revealed, yet the kiss left them more fractured than before. The council meeting continued in the background, a cacophonous din of disillusionment and demands for accountability. Close friends and family members exchanged looks that spoke of dismay and disbelief. The once unified front of the family now stood divided, not only by the administrative fallout of the fraud exposure, but by an emotional chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. In the charged atmosphere, the collective heartbeat of the gathering was one of betrayal, a slow and painful unraveling of long-standing bonds. Outside, the cool twilight provided a stark contrast to the heat of the confrontation inside. Amelia slipped away from the clamor of the council, seeking refuge in a quiet hallway that led to a secluded balcony. There, the gravity of the revelation began to anchor its weight on her soul. Shadows danced on her face as she considered the enormity of the night's events, the public shaming of a trusted ally, the fracturing of a family legacy, and the bittersweet echo of a kiss that was as unresolved as it was passionate. Daniel, too, found himself wrestling with his inner turmoil. Standing apart from the center of the chaos, he replayed the moment of their contact over and over. It was as if that kiss had sealed his fate, binding him to a moment of both undeniable desire and unforgivable betrayal. The emotional wreckage was far from complete. Neither could escape the feeling that the kiss might have been an attempt to salvage what remained of their love or a final, desperate acknowledgement of irrevocable damage. In its wake, their hearts were left pained and pondering, still yearning for something pristine amid the ruin. Back in the council chamber, the atmosphere was heavy with the twin legacies of truth and scorn. Family members began to whisper of necessary reforms, while others lamented the ruin of a family institution that had once been their pride. In every corner of that room, the essence of betrayal lingered, its chill a reminder that what was lost might never be fully recovered. As the night wore on, Amelia stood at a crossroads torn between the need to honor the truth and the desire to reconcile with the man who had once been her confidant and lover. The public exposure of the fraud was only the beginning. The night promised no easy resolutions, only the beginning of a journey through the murky aftermath of exposure and betrayal, a journey that would test the limits of forgiveness, the strength of familial bonds, and the enduring power of love enmeshed with heartbreak. Chapter 4. Redemption in the Aftermath. The day after the scandal broke, the air in the family home was heavy with a tension that cut deeper than any sharp remark. Amelia sat at the window in the quiet study, her eyes tracing the dust motes that danced in the pale morning light, each one a silent reminder of shattered trust. The public exposure of the fraudulent scheme had left not only an indelible mark on her reputation, but on the emotional landscape of her entire family. The once familiar walls that had borne witness to her laughter and dreams now held the echoes of whispered betrayal. She struggled to reconcile the bitter sting of deception with her desire to heal and rebuild the bonds that once felt unbreakable. It had been weeks since the truth emerged, and while many in the community had moved on, within the confines of her home a storm still raged. Family members retreated into themselves. The casual conversations replaced by cautious avoidance. Amelia knew that each cold glance and hesitant word was a reminder of the trust that had been so carelessly broken. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, she found herself grappling with a maelstrom of conflicting feelings, the need to protect her own vulnerable heart and the recognition of an overwhelming urge to find forgiveness and hope for the future. Late one evening, as soft rain tapped against the window panes, Daniel sought her out. There was a fragile determination in his approach, a humility that belied the pride which had once fueled his missteps. He found Amelia in the living room, where soft lamplight cast long shadows on the worn carpet, echoing the weight of their shared past. As the minutes passed in silence, the gap between them filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of pain and regret. "Amelia," he began quietly, his voice tinged with remorse. "I know that nothing I say or do can undo the damage I've caused, but please, hear me out." His eyes searched hers earnestly, as if willing the forgiveness to be there, amid the ruins of trust. He continued with a confession that was raw and unfiltered, a recounting of misjudged decisions, of self-deception, and ultimately of actions that had hurt not only her, but everyone who had believed in him. Each word was a plea for redemption, a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm his betrayal had created. Amelia listened with guarded vulnerability. Every syllable from Daniel was laced with pain and regret, yet she could sense an underlying sincerity that threatened to soften the edge of her wounded heart. The room seemed to shrink around them, isolating the pair in a moment that was both charged with emotion and fragile in its promise. As his confession drew to a close, he dared to offer more than just words. He extended his hand, an invitation to begin anew, his eyes pleading for the chance to prove that he was more than the culmination of his mistakes. For a long moment, silence reigned as Amelia's inner battle unfolded. The memory of betrayal warred with her innermost desire to trust again. The tinted glass of the room refracted the delicate interplay of light and shadow that mirrored her conflicted state of mind. She reached out, hesitantly placing her hand over his. In that simple contact, there was the promise of understanding, a tentative step towards mending what had been broken. It was not an act of forgiveness in its entirety, but a small act of courage in the face of overwhelming despair. Their conversation flowed into the night, punctuated by moments of quiet reflection, where the past was neither fully condemned nor completely exonerated. Amelia spoke of the agony of betrayal, the silent suffering that had seeped into every corner of her soul, while Daniel offered not just apologies, but insights into his own failings and the lessons he had painfully learned. His revelations were unvarnished, exposing vulnerabilities he had long shielded from the world. In turn, Amelia's recounting was marked by a raw honesty that laid bare her emotional scars. A chronicle of disillusionment painted with the tentative colors of hope. In a particularly poignant moment, as the conversation reached its apex, a fragile spark of familiarity flared between them. What started as a cautious gesture evolved into a second, tentative kiss, a kiss that was not meant to erase the past, but to acknowledge it and allow some measure of healing to begin. It was a quiet affirmation of love that had been marred by recent events, yet was deeply rooted in the shared history of their hearts. Their lips met in a subtle caress, a symbolic renewal that was imbued with both promise and caution. This kiss carried the weight of regret and the possibility of redemption, a promise that while the scars might never fully fade, there could be a journey toward healing that they were willing to undertake together. As dawn broke over the horizon, the first light seemed to whisper that every ending holds within it the seed of a new beginning. The fallout of the fraud had unmasked hidden vulnerabilities and forced a confrontation with painful truths. In the aftermath, amid to the erosion of old certainties, Amelia and Daniel stood at a crossroads. There remained a long road ahead, paved with the lingering remnants of betrayal and the slow, but steady, work of rebuilding trust. The family, too, sensed the need for transformation. What had once been taken for granted now demanded introspection. The frayed threads of relationships were being slowly rewoven with care and cautious optimism. That morning, as the household stirred to a new rhythm, Amelia felt a stirring of renewal within herself. The moments of solitude that had been spent wrestling with despair were gradually giving way to a determination to forgive, not in a fleeting puff of emotion, but as an act of strength. Trust, once lost, might be imperfectly reclaimed through time, resilience, and unyielding commitment. Each step forward would come with setbacks, but they were determined that the trajectory must always aim upward. The raw authenticity that had emerged in their conversations was echoed in every face that tentatively smiled in the wake of collective sorrow. A recognition that redemption was not a singular act, but a continual process of reconciliation. In the quiet aftermath, as the ties that once seemed irrevocably severed began to mend, there was a subtle transformation in every soul within the home. The path to forgiveness was neither linear nor free of obstacles. Yet, in that fragile moment, when a second kiss bridged the fissure between remorse and renewal, both Amelia and Daniel embraced the idea that even the deepest wounds could eventually lessen with time and sincerity. Amid the lingering pain, there was now a palpable hope, a notion that in this changed world, honesty and love might once again prevail, softly and steadily, against the relentless tide of past mistakes. The journey was far from over, and though scars would remain as a reminder of the past, there was an earnest commitment to navigate the uncertain terrain together. And as the family slowly began piecing together the remnants of trust, there was a quiet